morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you may be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. I've realized how sexually immature we are as a society. And this is a stunning insight. Now, I'm not going to refer to Freud here, anything written in the 1800s or early 1900s, because while the work is pioneering, it's hopelessly outdated. What I'm referring to is common experience. And I myself have experienced many of these things. You're sitting on a couch watching whatever's popular today, whatever movie, and directors have felt it necessary to put sexual intercourse into their movies for the past 30, 40 years. Like it's at the point it's gratuitous. But they feel they have to do it because the spirit of an age is weakest in what it needs the most. And all these authors and screenwriters and everything have realized what I'm saying. Sexual intercourse is something that is still not talked about. Let's look at the simplest scenario. So you're there with your child or even your friend, and said sex scene comes up. It's probably a little bit of tension in the room. And I don't mean tension in certain areas of the body. I mean, yeah, we're watching this happen, but, it's just awkward. Not the fact that intercourse itself is awkward, but as a society, it's something we don't talk about. Maybe you have your child there, and I'm not blaming any parent that decides to have their child with them while they watch a movie with a scene or two that gets intimate. And the child, being naturally curious, mommy, daddy, parental figure, what's going on? And then you tend to use euphemisms. Oh, they love each other very much. Oh, they're kissing. Oh, there's all sorts of euphemisms for it. But that never changes. Sure, the guys down at the hockey club in their dressing room, they use all sorts of euphemisms for it that are much more adult. But when you're speaking with another adult, you still tend to try and pretend to be polite. And, oh, yeah, they were in the closet together. They were, actually, that's a very specific euphemism. I shouldn't have chose that one. They were having quiet time together. They were, exploring each other. All these crazy euphemisms. And where that becomes relevant is I realized it defines one of the biggest problems we have with the LGBTQ plus community. Sorry, updated to SLGBTQ plus community. Please come up with an easier acronym. I respect you guys. I love you guys, but just that acronym's killing me. Back to the subject, though. This is why we have such problems discussing this, what am I going to call it? These actions, which are fundamentally the same that everybody else goes through. And, yeah. Why is it so embarrassing? Because we don't have the right euphemisms to cover it. We're getting better at it. I think overall we're improving. There's a few people that are counter-reacting. That's the Hegelian dialectic. You come up with a thesis, an idea. The antithesis pops up, which are the people resistant to giving them rights and stuff like that. And then eventually the two synthesize and there's a mutual bond between the two. There's a mutual acceptance. Well, we're still going through the dialectic part, unfortunately. And we have to remember there's there's still some war babies out there. They're in their 80s, but they're still kicking. There's boomers, miles and miles and miles of boomers. And they were taught that you don't talk about these things. Even if you are a practicing 2S LGBTQ plus person, even if you're practicing it yourself, you don't have that dialogue to engage with somebody else and explain what's going on. Because there's no dialogue present, that's what makes the ultra conservatives, the regressive conservatives, as I like to call them, which is a funny pun on our own progressive conservatives. But I don't say all conservatives. Plenty of conservatives have had their come to Jesus moment and are perfectly okay with it. But like I said, we as a society do not possess the dialogue, the options in our vocabulary to talk about this in a mature way. Now, it can happen. My own dialogue is pathetic, but I still know some people that are in the 2S LGBTQ plus spectrum that have been willing to talk to me and explain things to me. It's as comfortable as I can make it for them. And I hope they've told me that they're glad I asked the question and chose to be educated rather than live in ignorance, which I consider a great compliment, because I'm the cohort down from the boomers. I'm Gen X. And we were still raised with that incredible stigma. Heck, we didn't have waivers for, your child learning sexual education, but at the same token, we still had that moment in class where the teacher got out the video machine and stood somewhere in the darkness while we watched somebody scientifically trying to talk about an inherently emotional act. We also fail as a society when it comes to SA. Abuse added on to the word I've been using quite frequently. YouTube, for some reason, is very particular about not allowing those two words to be put together, even though it's willing to let me report on evidence. Let me put it this way. Vince McMahon, former chairman of the WWE/WWF, is in a trial for trafficking. Again, I'm not sure I can combine the two words together. Trafficking his employees as service people. I don't know. I don't have the vocabulary unless you allow me to put these two words together. But basically, his assistant was being told to service other men sexually, and in return she'd be paid an amount of money. Now this is disgusting. And I was listening to an interview of somebody who I used to respect, and let me get to why I don't respect them anymore. And this person was saying, these things happen, he feels disgusted by it, and then he said the words that bother me. This is the act of somebody who is mentally ill. No, that's not the right word. There's plenty of people who are mentally ill that don't harm anybody else, that don't sit at the top of a multi-billion-dollar empire and use millions of dollars of company funds as hush money. And all this, okay, I'll tell you, it was Eric Bischoff that I was listening to. All this I was on board with, but I didn't like him saying mentally ill. And this is where I've been mulling this thought over in my head about we don't have the vocabulary to express what was going on in this situation, and we're being prevented from using it by the structure and strictures of YouTube. So this human trafficking, it's a very particular type of human trafficking, went on apparently for years until finally the person filed a complaint. And does anybody care to put money on the table on whether she's the only one? I'll take those bets. But the part that really bothered me about Eric Bischoff and his podcast 83 Weeks, which I used to enjoy, but I'm not going to anymore, is his words were, remember, he's a actual family friend of McMahon's family. His son, all those people, they're actually close friends. With Vince, it's business, but with the rest that he's with, and I should probably take that in context, but I can't because after he said that, he said words that broke my heart. And he said, I just wish this woman would take the money and go away so that she can find, her inner peace, her salvation, whatever. Eric, this woman was traumatized for years. I don't know what kind of therapy is available, but I know it's not a matter of here, take some money and go to therapy. Like, ugh, you make my skin crawl. I used to think it was a character that you played, but no, you're actually a disgusting human being. Not as bad as your former boss, but your attitude, and I'm hoping that's because he lacks the vocabulary to communicate his thoughts. That's his only saving grace, but I'd rather cut that person out of my life than have to deal with attitudes like that because it's disgusting. Again, it's not a mental illness to want to do that. It is outside the bounds of society, but it's something completely different than mental illness. That kind of trafficking still goes on pretty much everywhere in the world. And again, we don't have the vocabulary to discuss it. English is an incredible language with so many words and so many combinations. Think of all the books in a library. Do you think that's even 1/100th of the books that are available? Heck no. Libraries don't have the space, libraries don't have the budget. And the problem is until we're able to freely discuss our own passions, our own desires, and there's certain things, of course, I don't want on the table. You know, anything involving minors. No, I'm talking about adults. I don't, adults only here. That's difficult enough to talk about. Minors, ooh, that would be a long, long show. And I don't think I'll ever do it because it's tough for me to talk about this. My vocabulary is not wide enough. So, the essential point of all this is we are failing as a society to provide people with what they need. We don't need another bunch of buzzwords. As much as I say, give me a simpler, it's not an anagram, give me a simpler phrase to say rather than 2SLGBTQ plus, just because it's hard to remember and it doesn't really roll off the tongue. You know, alters unfortunately has been taken over by the psychological community, and I don't know where to go from there. I can recognize a problem though. See, people are still sitting around and thinking they're serving God's will by based off a textbook that they haven't even read. But somebody told them something about it once, and therefore that must be absolute truth. Remember the episode about sovereign citizens? Yeah, it's the exact same situation, except unlike sovereign citizens, who are a percentage of the population, sexual activity, whatever, from a kiss all the way up to whatever's on the deep web and the dark web that I don't want to know about, that's an activity that probably impacts 90% or more. And I'm just trying to round it because there are people that remain abstinent. But the vast majority of people choose not to. In abstinence, we have a word for that because it suited the religious people of the time to develop a word for it. We have so far to go as a society. We can't talk about what we need to, and we're well past the time to address these issues. And as long as there's premiers like the Alberta premier who wants to restrict LGBTQ rights, Plenty of governors in the states feel the same way, and whether they think they're protecting the family, which I don't see how this affects the family in any other way than you might not get as many grandchildren. Ooh. So we need language. We need efficient language. We need language that we can communicate with. And I don't see anybody doing anything to make it happen. I hope somebody does, but chances are they're not listening to this show, unfortunately. With that, we'll bring this to an end. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please like, share, because sharing is caring. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. If you click the bell icon down at the bottom, then you'll be notified every time that we upload a new episode. And we hope you have a fantastic day.